My mother's name is Ruth. She raised me by herself after my father left, when I was 6. I don't have a lot of memories of him, just impressions, really. The smell of his jacket. The sound of the door closing. My mother standing in the kitchen the next morning making pancakes, like it was any other Saturday. Because she didn't want me to see her fall apart. We didn't have a lot of money. Ruth worked as a school administrator. She helped run the front office at Clover Falls Elementary for 31 years. 31 years in the same building, the same hallways, knowing every kid's name, every teacher's birthday, every parent who was going through something hard. She was the kind of person that a whole town quietly depended on without ever fully saying so. I grew up watching her pour herself into other people's lives. And I told myself, even as a kid, I was going to pour myself into my own life. I was going to go somewhere. I was going to be something that people could point to and say, there, that's what's possible. I was ambitious before I even had words for it. I was ambitious in the way that only children who grew up with very little can be, with a kind of hunger that doesn't really have an off switch. My mother never discouraged me. Not once. She came to every school play, every honor roll ceremony, every graduation. She sat in folding chairs in school gyms and community centers, and she clapped the loudest, every single time. And whenever I told her about some new dream I had, moving to a big city, getting a high-powered job, traveling, building a life that looked nothing like Clover Falls, she would just smile and say, "Then that's what you'll do, Maggie." She believed in me completely. And I took that completely for granted. I left when I was 22, right after college. I had a business degree and an entry-level job offer from a mid-size consulting firm in Chicago, and I felt like I had won something. Like I had beaten some invisible game that nobody else, in my hometown, had figured out how to play. The morning I left, my mother made breakfast. Eggs, toast, the orange juice. She always squeezed herself even though it took forever. She sat across from me at that small kitchen table we'd had since I was a kid, the one with the wobbly leg she'd fixed with a folded piece of cardboard, and she watched me eat, and she didn't say much. I remember she kept smoothing her napkin in her lap, just to smooth it over. When it was time to go, I hugged her in the driveway. I kissed her cheek, quickly, the way you do when you're in a hurry and you think you'll see someone again soon. I loaded the last bag into my Honda, and I got in, and I drove away. I didn't look back. I have thought about that moment so many times since then. The fact that I didn't look back. Mother, standing in that driveway, watching me go. And me, staring straight ahead at the road, already mentally in Chicago, already somewhere else. I didn't look back. I'm not sure I've ever forgiven myself for that, fully. Chicago was everything I had imagined and nothing like what I expected. The city was loud and fast, and beautiful and completely indifferent to me, which I found both terrifying and exhilarating. Nobody in Chicago knew I was from Clover Falls. Nobody knew my mother, or my history, or the fact that I had grown up shopping at thrift stores and eating generic brand cereal. In Chicago, I could be whoever I decided to be. That felt like freedom. The purest kind. I threw myself into work, completely. I was in the office early and I stayed late. I learned everything I could, asked questions, volunteered for extra projects, made myself useful in every room I walked into. My colleagues were sharp and competitive, and I loved it. I loved the pace of it. I loved feeling like I was finally operating at full speed after years of feeling like I was. Running in slow motion in a place that wasn't built for someone like me. I'm Aji friends, or something like friends. Work friends, brunch friends. People you have a great time with on Saturday afternoon and don't think about on Monday morning. I dated a little, nothing serious. I told myself I was focused on my career, which was true, but it was also a convenient reason to not look too closely at the fact that I was lonely in ways I didn't want to examine. And then I met Daniel. He joined the firm about 8 months after I did. He was quiet in that particular way that you notice, not shy, just deliberate. He didn't perform himself the way a lot of people in that environment did. He just showed up, did excellent work, and went home at a reasonable hour. In a place full of people who were constantly signaling how important they were, Daniel's calm stood out like something almost radical. We became friends slowly, coffee in the break room, walking to the train station in the same direction, talking about books, about the city, about nothing in particular. He was funny, genuinely funny, not in a showy way. Just in the way of someone who notices the small absurdities of life and is quietly delighted by them. I fell into caring about Daniel before I realized it was happening. He was the first person in Chicago who felt real to me, not a version of himself he was selling, just real. He remembered everything I told him, every small thing. I mentioned once, offhandedly, that cilantro tasted like soap to me, and after that he would check menus for me before we ordered. I told him once that Thursdays were my hottest days at work, and from then on, he would text me on Thursday mornings. Just something small, a funny observation, a photo of something weird he saw on his commute, just to make me smile. Just because he was paying attention. Nobody had ever paid that kind of attention to me before. And instead of understanding what that meant, I filed it away under sweet and kept it at a careful distance. We dated for almost 2 years. And they were good years, genuinely good. We cooked dinner together. We explored neighborhoods. We drove out to the Indiana dunes one summer and walked along the water for hours, talking about everything and nothing. I was happy. I actually was. But there was this voice in the back of my mind. This constant, low-level noise. And the voice said, "This is not enough. He is not enough. He wants too little. A small house, a dog, Sunday mornings that go nowhere. That's his dream, and it's fine for him. But if you let yourself love him completely, if you let yourself settle into this, you will disappear. You will become ordinary. And ordinary is the thing you have been running from your entire life." I listened to that voice. I shouldn't have, but I did. I ended things on a Tuesday night, in the apartment we had started talking about, sharing. I sat across from him at his kitchen table and I said, "I think we want different things. I think you deserve someone who dreams the same way you do." And I believed I was being honest. I believed I was doing the right thing, for both of us. He didn't argue. Daniel wasn't the kind of person who argued. He just looked at me for a long moment, and then he nodded, slowly, and said, "Okay, Margaret. If that's what you need," and his voice was so steady, so careful. And I could see how much he was holding together in that moment, and I told myself that steadiness was proof I was right. That someone who could hold it together that well couldn't possibly be devastated. That he'd be fine. I think about that a lot, how wrong I was. How I mistook his dignity for indifference. I left his apartment, and I walked home through the cold, and I told myself I was free. I told myself I had made the brave choice. I told myself I was protecting my future. I didn't cry until I was inside my own apartment, with the door closed and the lights off. And then I cried for a long time. And I still told myself it was the right thing. Work got better. I got promoted. Twice. Then a third time. I moved to a nicer apartment. I started dressing the part, speaking the part, living the part. From the outside, everything looked like progress. Everything looked like the story I had set out to write for myself. My mother called every Sunday at noon. And for the first couple of years, I always answered. I would sit on my couch or stand at my kitchen window looking out at the city, and we would talk for an hour sometimes. She would tell me about her week, her book club, her garden. Her neighbor Lorraine, who came over on Friday evenings and brought casseroles that were genuinely not good but that my mother ate with complete enthusiasm anyway. She would ask me about work, about Chicago, about whether I was eating properly. And I would tell her things were good, because they were. And she would say she was proud of me, and I would feel warm for a little while, but then the calls started getting shorter. Not because anything changed between us, just because I was busy, because Sunday mornings started filling up with other things. Brunch plans, work I'd brought home, the particular exhaustion of a week that had taken everything from me. I started letting calls go to voicemail more. Just occasionally at first, and then more regularly. I always told myself I'd call back, and sometimes I did, and sometimes I forgot, and time moved the way time does when you're not watching it. My mother never complained, never once. She just left voicemails in her steady, warm voice. Hi, sweetheart. It's Mom. Just checking in. Hope your week was good. Love you. Call when you can. Always. Call when you can. Never. Why haven't you called? Never. I miss you. She didn't want to be a burden. She had raised me with this fierce independence because she thought it was the best gift she could give me, and she was right. But the cost of that gift, for her, was that I used my independence to drift away, and she loved me too much to pull me back. She sent birthday cards every year. Long ones, not just a signature, but a full handwritten note in her careful, looping script, telling me things she was proud of. Memories she was thinking about, little hopes she had for my year ahead. She mailed newspaper clippings, articles she thought I'd find interesting, recipes she wanted to try, occasionally something about Ohio weather like she was worried I'd forgotten what seasons looked like. I read them, and I appreciated them, and I did not write back the way she deserved. I was 34 when I changed jobs. Moved to a different firm, Motivational, more money, a corner office by the time I was 36. I was doing exactly what I had told myself I would do. I was exactly where I said I was going, and I was so tired, all the time, so tired. But I told myself that was just what success felt like. That exhaustion was the price of building something that mattered. I dated a few people after Daniel, nothing that lasted. I always found something that wasn't quite right, too passive, too needy, not focused enough, not interesting enough. I had very high standards. I told myself I was particular. I knew what I wanted. Looking back, I think I was terrified. I think I was terrified of letting someone in and finding out that I wasn't as easy to love as I needed to believe I was. Daniel had loved me with such effortless completeness, and I had walked away from it, and somewhere deep down I think I knew that meant something was broken in me. So I kept my distance from anyone who got close enough to see it. I was at work when my phone rang. It was a Tuesday, around 7 in the evening. I was finishing something, some report or presentation, something that felt urgent at the time and that I cannot now remember at all. It was Mrs. Chun, my mother's neighbor. I had met her exactly once, briefly, years before when I had visited for Christmas. She said, "Margaret, I'm sorry to call you at this number. Your mother gave it to me a long time ago for emergencies." And before she finished the sentence, I was already standing up from my desk, already reaching for my coat. My mother had had a stroke. Mrs. Chun had noticed that Ruth's car hadn't moved all day and her lights hadn't come on in the evening, which was unlike her, and so she had gone over and knocked. And when there was no answer, she had used the spare key my mother had given her years ago, for exactly this kind of moment, and she had found her on the kitchen floor. She was alive. Mrs. Chun said it quickly, before I could ask. She's alive. She's in the ambulance right now. She's conscious. She's asking for you. I drove 5 hours through the night. I don't remember most of that drive. I remember the highway being dark and empty and feeling very long. I remember gripping the steering wheel until my hands hurt. I remember going through every memory I had of my mother and being struck over and over by how many of them were from my childhood, how thin the recent years were, how little I actually knew about her current life, her daily rhythms, her worries, what she did with her evenings, what she was afraid of. I had been so busy building my life that I had stopped paying attention to hers. She was sitting up when I got there. That was the first thing I noticed, and I almost collapsed with relief. She was sitting up. She was awake. And when she saw me in the doorway, she said Maggie in this voice that was slightly different, slightly slower, slightly softer, and I understood in that moment what the stroke had taken. Her right side was affected, her hand, her face, slightly. The doctors were cautiously optimistic, which is the kind of language that means we don't know yet, but we're trying not to scare you. She would need months of physical therapy. She would likely recover much of what she'd lost, but not all of it. Her right hand would probably never be fully what it was. My mother was right-handed. She spent her life writing things by hand. Birthday cards, notes to students' parents, recipes, letters. Her handwriting was this beautiful thing, careful and looping. The kind of handwriting that takes time. And I sat there thinking about all the birthday cards she had sent me, all those notes written in that careful hand, and I thought, she might not be able to do that anymore. Because of a stroke that happened when nobody was home. Because I wasn't there. I met the doctors. I spoke to the nurses. I called Ruth's book club coordinator, a woman named Patricia, who cried on the phone and said she'd been trying to reach me. Apparently she had my number from a list. Ruth kept in her kitchen drawer a list of people to call in an emergency. My mother had planned for this. She had prepared for the possibility that something might happen to her, and she had done it quietly, without involving me, because she knew I was busy and she didn't want to make me feel obligated. That hit me harder than almost anything else. Lorraine came to the hospital the next morning. I had heard her name so many times on the phone. Ruth always mentioned her, but I had never met her. She was in her late 60s, small, with reading glasses pushed up on her head, and she walked into that room and took my mother's hand and said, "You scared the daylights out of me, Ruth, and my mother laughed, actually laughed, this small, crooked laugh because of the stroke, and I watched them together and I realized that this woman knew my mother, really knew her, the way I should have known her. Lorraine had been there for years, every Friday evening. Bad casseroles and good company, every single week. She knew my mother's routines, her preferences, her worries. She knew that Ruth kept meaning to fix the step on the back porch, but kept putting it off. She knew that Ruth had been having trouble sleeping since the previous winter and had mentioned it to the doctor. She knew my mother in the way that presence creates knowledge. Slowly, incrementally, through showing up over and over again. I had not been showing up. It was the 3rd day in the hospital. My mother was improving. The doctors were more optimistic. and the immediate terror had settled into something slower and heavier. I sat in the chair beside her bed that afternoon. The light was coming through the blinds in long pale stripes. She had a thin hospital blanket over her lap. She looked tired but clear, more herself than she had in the first 2 days. I had been trying to figure out how to apologize. I didn't know where to start. Every sentence I rehearsed in my head felt too small for what I was trying to say. Finally, I just said, "Mom, I'm sorry I wasn't here more. I'm sorry I let the calls go to voicemail. I'm sorry that a neighbor found you and not me. I didn't. I kept telling myself that you were fine, that you had your life, that you didn't need me hovering around." She put her hand on mine, her left hand than the wit always had, and she said, "Maggie, just that." Then she waited a moment, and she said, "I never needed you to come. I just wanted you to want to." I had to leave the room. I walked out into the hallway, and I stood there with my back against the wall, and I put my hand over my mouth, and I fell apart. Because she had said exactly the right thing not to me. She wasn't capable of saying something to hurt me on purpose. She said it because it was true, and because she trusted me enough to hear it. She had never needed saving. She had a full life, good friends, a community that knew her and loved her. What she had needed, what she had always needed, was for me to want to be part of it. To want to be there, not out of duty, not out of guilt, but just because she was my mother and she was worth showing up for. I had made her feel like a checkbox. I stayed for 3 weeks while she started her recovery. And then I went back to Chicago, and I told myself I'd visit more. And I did, for a while. I came every month. Then some months were harder to make work than others. And I watched myself slipping back into the same patterns, and for the first time I could actually see it clearly. Like looking at something through glass that had just been cleaned. About 4 months after the stroke, I called my boss and told her I needed a different arrangement. She was understanding more than I expected. I transitioned out of my role over the next 6 months. I found a job in Columbus, close enough to Clover Falls to drive in under an hour. And then, on a Wednesday in November, I loaded my car, a better car now, not the old Honda, and I drove back to Ohio. I told myself it was temporary. It wasn't temporary. I'd take my mother to physical therapy on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I sit in the waiting room and I do my work on my laptop and I drink terrible coffee from a machine in the corner. And when she comes out, I can see by her face how hard it was. And we stop on the way home and get soup from this diner she loves. I know the waitress's name now. I know which booth my mother prefers. I know that she always orders the tomato bisque, and then wonders if she should have gotten the chicken noodle. I know these things because I am here. I am finally here. I know Lorraine now. We have had dinner together, the 3 of us, many times. The casseroles are, in fact, genuinely not good. I understand now why my mother said they were wonderful. Because when someone loves you that consistently, the casserole doesn't matter at all. My mother has an entire world of people who showed up for her, who chose her, week after week, year after year. While I was building my important life in Chicago, she was building this community. This texture of connection and care in small, daily love. And she built it without me because I wasn't there. I heard through someone, a mutual acquaintance from the old firm, that Daniel got married a few years after we ended things, has 3 kids now, lives outside Columbus, actually, which I find strange and a little poetic, given that I'm here too. I've never run into him. Maybe I will someday. I hope he is happy. I mean that without any reservation. I hope he got the small house, and the dog, and the Sundays that go nowhere. And I hope he knows, every single day, how much those things are worth. I understand now what I actually did when I left him. It wasn't about his ambition or his dreams. It was about mine. I was afraid that if I chose a quiet, steady love, it meant I was a quiet, steady person, and I was not ready to find out if I was. I thought I needed to accomplish something enormous first. Something that would prove I was worth loving in a bigger, louder way. What I didn't understand, what it took me years and heartbreak, and a 2 a.m. drive to a hospital in Ohio to understand, is that being loved by someone who pays attention is not ordinary. It is the rarest thing there is. It is what most people spend their whole lives looking for and never find. And I had it, sitting across from me at a kitchen table. Remembering that I hate cilantro, and I walked away from it because I was 20-something and frightened and very, very foolish. I don't say that to be hard on myself. I say it because it's true, and I think the truth is the only useful thing I have to offer. I don't say that to be hard on myself. I say it because it's true, and I think the truth is the only useful thing I have to offer. If you are watching this, and you recognize yourself in any part of what I've said, if you are the person who is too busy, who keeps meaning to call, who thinks the people who love you will always be there waiting exactly as you left them, I want you to hear this. They won't always be there. Not because they don't love you, but because time moves without asking your permission, and strokes happen on Tuesday afternoons, and neighbors find people on kitchen floors. And one day you will drive a long dark road and realize that the life you were so busy building was missing the people who mattered most. You don't have to move back home. You don't have to sacrifice everything. I'm not saying any of that. I'm saying, call your mother. Not when you have time. Now, call her and stay on the phone long enough to actually hear how she's doing. Go visit the person you keep saying you'll visit. Tell the person who shows up for you, quietly and consistently, that you see them and you're grateful. The big life you're chasing, I chased it. I caught parts of it. And from here, looking back, the parts of my life that actually mattered were not the promotions, or the nice apartment, or the sense that I was becoming someone impressive. It was the soup at the diner after physical therapy. It was learning Lauren's name. It was finally sitting at my mother's kitchen table, the same table with the wobbly leg. Still wobbling. The cardboard fold still holding it up after all these years, and drinking coffee with her on a Saturday morning, and not being in a hurry to go anywhere. That's what I was running toward, all along. I just didn't know it until I had spent 20 years running away from it. My name is Margaret. I'm 44 years old. I'm from Clover Falls, Ohio, and I am finally home.